You will have some fourth down, sure, but let's plow people back on 3rd and 1, get the first down, break away and score a touchdown, or let's find a way to not have to have a 4th and 1 mentality. Roll forward to this year. Hugh Freeze, in yesterday's video clip, it's easy to find, he was talking about people think different things about you, the individual Auburn player, you, the team, Auburn team, you, the Auburn coaching staff. And does that matter? He said, no, what really matters is what you think of yourself and what we think of ourselves. So what I'm going to be fascinated to watch, and we'll need more than one game this Saturday to make a judgment of it. But when we get to 5 or 6 games body of work, how big a difference in human performance, that is the Auburn football team, who we know is a little below average, or maybe right at average talent-wise, probably above average on some positions like running back and defensive back. So there's some things to work with. But how much does that mental edge that Hugh Freeze and this staff brings, how much of a difference can that make on a Saturday when the game is on the line? I think it will make a difference absolutely in what I call the swing games. And we know which ones those are, Rob.
You're dead on the psychology that we always tell the runners and stuff, and that people that have coached me, that have helped me, it's that 6 inches between your ears. If you mentally, you got to tell yourself every night, Audrey says, every night before you go to bed, say 9 times to yourself, I'm rich, I'm rich, I'm rich. Then you say, my name is Doug Dean. Great things happen to me every day. She has a psychology major, and she has a master's in elementary ed, and her specialty is teaching dyslexic children how to read. And that she bats 1,000. But you, Doug, that's what separates you. I don't have another guest with your skill set. And Mildred is, shacked up there in the bed sleeping in this morning while I'm producing. And I have to always remember to hit the go live button, which and Doug, this is so anyway, the psychology is so big. Audrey will watch a game and look at the body language of the players, and she's incredible at picking. They have no chance. If they're hanging their heads after a bad play, that team is in big trouble. I love to watch this stuff.
I give you a quick briefing on UMass, and I realize that the average fan out there will say, "Oh, this game's going to be a laugher. Why do we even do a scouting report?" And the reason I am is, like I said, when you're talking about an opener with Auburn has so many unknowns. And yes, Jordan Hare, especially with temps high of 82, if it was not already going to be packed, even at 95, it's going to be Saturday. People will want to enjoy that. You got a long Labor Day weekend, so even if you're at lake or beach, you can come Saturday and still got 2 days to have fun on the wind and the sun and water. But look at that game, that opener against New Mexico State. It's always interesting when a team gashes its opponent for 470 total yards, Rob, like New Mexico State did, and finds a way to lose. How did they do that against the visiting Minutemen? They coughed up 3 turnovers, and UMass had 0 turnovers. So kudos to Don Browne, who's a member of AARP, Robbie 68. So he's seen a lot of football. His nickname is Dr. Blitz. We'll see how much, if he blitzes this Auburn offense a lot on Saturday. And I hope he does, frankly, because I'd like to see this offensive line change the calls at the line. Peyton Thorne check out of a bad play when run or pass blitz is coming, and get to some check downs and learn from that, because the way we want to run the ball, we're going to see some blitzes a lot this year. But what you know is that when there's a big blitz like that, somebody's band is going to play. So what happened to UMass in that game, they had, dig this, looking at UMass's defense, New Mexico State had no trouble running the ball or passing. They had 38 carries for 222 yards. That's a losing 5.5 yards per carry average, like Auburn had last year. And secondly, they had no trouble passing the ball on UMass. 16 of 27, 248 yards. So that's 9.2 yards per completion. And yet New Mexico State found a way to lose 41-30. So I think Auburn has a chance if they can execute, be ahead of schedule on that. Auburn will have a chance on their comfortable home setting to surpass 250, possibly 300 yards on the ground. And what I don't know is how much Montgomery and Freeze will actually want to throw the ball. I think they're not motivated to beat the 35-point spread. You hear jokes about that, help the big boosters. I think they just want to win comfortably and get a lot of work for guys. So you may see it be one of those games that stays more like 42-17 type of win. So if I'm a wager, I'm not. I'd pass on this one. I wouldn't want to have to lay 35 points.
Doug, when you watch the game like I do, I like to break it down. When I know the game is in play, your first team, and in the SEC, the better teams, the first and second team, there's little difference, if any, in at Alabama or Georgia. I mean, it's the way it is. But there's going to be a difference with Auburn right now. But you mentioned the talent issue a few minutes ago, and I have here in my hands this list. It's the Blue Chip Index. Yep. And this year, there are 16 teams that have more than 50% of their roster in the last 4-year cycle are 4- and 5-star players. And as bad as Auburn fans think things are, and it's been rough with Mr. Potato Head there and the end of Gus because no recruiting really took place like it typically does. Auburn is still 16th on that list and qualifies technically as a team that could win a national championship. And that's how relative things are when you're Auburn and your in-state rivals, Alabama, and across the Chattahoochee, your other rival, Georgia, are on top of the college football world. So it's all a relative thing. But I'm with you. Look at how the game is dominated or not when it's in play. And then when you've got the second and third guys in there, nothing against them, but the focus and the intensity's not quite there. But I'm one of these people that I know it's bad, but I don't like to give up any points. I like to shut people out. I just want to win every game. That's all I want.
Yeah, and that's it. Gosh, you have to, people that want to be critical of Hugh Freeze for rating the portal for, I think, 20 players. It was to improve quality, but it's important to add to that, as you know, Rob, guess which one single player, shockingly, remains from the 2021 class?
Jarquez Cowboy Hunter from Philadelphia, Mississippi, Neshoba County.
If you're going to be limited to one player, that's a damn good one. But
last man standing.
We got depleted. I mean, and when you have a bad season and you've got some players that can go, they're going to look into the portal. And some of our rivals or lesser schools were happy to raid the portal when we brought misery upon ourselves hiring Brian Harsin. It just didn't work out. So Hugh, I mean, rightly so, Hugh said, man, this is not the business model for the future. Raiding the portal to this extent, in some ways, it's a signifier, Rob, of your own failure. You'd rather have that number be more like 10 or 12 difference makers every year. And if you look at the high school recruiting, it's unbelievable given the circumstances. Auburn is headed for stabilizing that after this 2024 class, which I still think can be top 10, not top 5 at this point. That's remarkable, and Hugh will be able to intelligently use the portal. We will start losing fewer players that are difference makers into the portal, and I think the future, starting in 24, is bright. And they're going to be that segment of fans that say, "Wow, wait, let's see if we can make noise and get to 9 wins this season." That's going to be a tall order, but after the A&M visit in College Station, we'll have a better idea, won't we, Rob?
Much better. And I think that when you look at a team, the portal, Monday night at the Touchdown Club in Memphis, Tony Barnhart was up here, gave a great PowerPoint presentation talking about what's going on in college football, what the coaches like, what they don't like. But the portal is here. And guys have always been transferring. That's been going on since the beginning of time. But you look at Georgia, look at Alabama. You're going to have you're going to have attrition without the portal. And you're right. And I think Kirby Smart talked about Carson Beck being named the starter. He goes, he had to remember, he's been here 3 years, I think. He goes, but he's part of this culture. He's part of what we are. And also Kirby Smart, if you watch the ESPN documentary on SEC Network, how about them dogs? He's in the locker room after they just stomped TCU 65-7 or whatever it was. And he said, this is tonight is an example of what mental and physical toughness are. He goes, if you're in this locker room, that means you got it. And if you're thinking about coming to Georgia, you better bring it. And that's what you've got to have. You've got to have mental toughness. And Freeze in that staff, Philip Montgomery, last 8 years, the head coach at Tulsa. Ron Roberts. I've been studying Ron Roberts for a long time when he was at Delta State, then Southeast Louisiana, and then Baylor. The most recent evidence of his defensive genius and prowess was when Baylor played Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl. The Sugar Bowl, was it, or Sugar or the Cotton a couple of years ago. And Matt Corral, I know he got hurt, but still, the defense he runs is called the creeper defense. And what it's designed to do is to slow down and confuse and cause chaos for RPO offenses. And Ron Roberts is a guy that just constantly evolves. Say what you want about Jeremy Pruitt, but Jeremy Pruitt adjusted in real time like very few defensive coordinators can do. I mean, and Jeremy Pruitt's a great – he's Bill Oliver good as a defensive coordinator. And Kirby Smart's really good. But I think Bill Oliver, who's now 83 years old, God love him, is the greatest defensive coordinator, Doug, I've ever seen. You talk about blitzing. He could bring 10 or 11 at sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, the game has changed offensively. So Oliver would absolutely have the ability to adapt. And he was the most feared defensive coordinator. I never looked. I was glad when he was on our side, and always dreaded offensively going up against Bill Oliver. You and I probably differ, but only slightly on Jeremy Pruitt. He's certainly great, but I think he has been the beneficiary of having some elite talent at schools like Alabama, where he built his reputation. And of course, he had Pruitt though, so he gets credit for it. Speaking of leaving Auburn for a minute, which, realistically, if Auburn takes care of business and they're who we think they are, especially offensive line and running backs, that should be a laugher before halftime Saturday, but that's why they play. But I'm most intrigued this Thursday night with, what will the real Florida stand up? And I didn't get to catch your segment with your resident Gator advisor, Browne, but I think that's going to be a down-to-the-wire game. I would probably have to pick Utah in a close one, only because it's out at Utah, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I have enormous respect for Kyle Whittingham as a football coach. Not that I don't Napier, but I really want, as I've told Buddy Martin on the show, I want Florida to be great again. Not so they can surpass Auburn, the team I pull for, but because we need the SEC East for this year to have some semblance of competitiveness and give Georgia a challenge. Because you know what? Georgia may get hurt by, even if they go undefeated regular season, which is chalk. I don't think they will. I think one team is going to get them. I don't know who that is. I've just watched football too long. But Georgia could go into the playoff not really having been battle tested enough, with the exception of whoever they face in Atlanta, which you would figure is most likely either Alabama or LSU.
Yeah, and I think you're right about the Gators. And I haven't seen Swamp Kings, but you heard, remember Saturday when Buddy Martin was on talking about that interview he had with Urban Meyer. He said Urban Meyer had 45 requests for interviews, and the only one he did was with Buddy Martin. Buddy will set you straight, and you're right about the Gators, but I think that's going to be I don't care if Cam Rising starts or not. That's a tough place to play. Year 18 for Kyle Whittingham, and you're right. I think he's one of the best coaches in college football.
Well, yeah, he probably doesn't get the full credit and pub that maybe he deserves, because there's a little bit of obscurity when you're head coach at Utah. They're not a regular entrant into the 4-team college football playoff. But he does play some big games, and he has put up a phenomenal record at Utah. A little bit surprising to me, he hasn't cashed in on an even bigger job, but we'll see how he gets to show what he's made of this Thursday night. And what is that, a 6 p.m. or 6:30 game, Rob?
Yeah, on the color TV, and it's at 4,200 feet. You've traveled all over the place. That altitude. This isn't Laramie, where the University of Wyoming is, where it's like 7,700 feet. And by the way, they have the High Altitude Performance Center up there for training. Unbelievable, but it's still 4,200 feet, and it takes some getting used to.
Yeah, well, I know, like you said, Rob, we're not all just thrilled that college football is starting in earnest. I just barely count week 0 last weekend, even though, frankly, I did tune in to Notre Dame Navy, and boy, Notre Dame got a player. There's a player at USC that you're not going to be able to take your eyes off of, Zachariah Branch. When he touches the ball, my goodness gracious, he is a super, super elite player. It'd be interesting to see what if that wide receiver returner had such numbers that he threatens his own starting quarterback, Caleb Williams, for attention in the Heisman race, even though Williams just won the Heisman last year.
Well, you had that a few years ago at Alabama, Najee Harris, and Devontae Smith, and that's a good problem they have. But didn't Southern Cal give up over 200 yards rushing? That's the worrisome stat for them.
Yeah, there was an article that said about Lincoln Riley said, "Fix the damn defense." And but the thing is, they, like you've seen teams the last 4 years, the national champion, it turns out, has disproven the myth that was true for decades that defense wins national championships. That's still true, but what happened was it was not a top 30 defense some years, but they always had a top 10 or 15 offense, and they got hot when it really mattered in big games. So USC probably only needs to become average defensively with the kind of offensive numbers they're going to put up.
Yeah, and you look at the defenses, Doug, in the national championships in the last 15 years. Most schools that are winning championships, defenses on those years, rank among their top 5 or top 10 worst in school history. But all things are relative. It's because the offenses are typically ranking as the first, second, or third most prolific in school history. So Nick Aliotti was the defensive coordinator at Oregon back with Chip Kelly. And I remember him talking about it when Auburn played Oregon out in Glendale. And he said the shutdown, lockdown defenses, they're almost extinct. He said you've just got to be able to play good enough and control to a point. But if you can't run the ball, no matter how good your offense is, that's when you're going to get in trouble. And if you look back, when Auburn played Oregon, their best running back, James, was from Texarkana, Texas. And their quarterback, Darren Thomas, was from suburban Houston. They were averaging 315 yards a game rushing. They led the nation. And with Big Nick Fairley out of Mobile, the port city, and the Auburn defense, Josh Mines, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, just Boyd Anderson High School. Auburn held them to 75 yards, and they won the line of scrimmage. And even doing that, it still went down for another product of Catholic education, St. Thomas Aquinas, West Byram, to kick the winning field goal. But, Doug, stay with us, man. We got Vince Ferrara coming on from the Sports Animal up in Knoxville.
On a short leash this morning. I apologize.
No, man. Okay, well, look, Vince is going to be with us here. Let's do this. Let's take a quick break. Stay with us as long as you can. Houston Nutt right after that, and Jordan Hill. We're going to take a quick break. Man, there's a lot of football to be talking about, and that's what we're going to do. Robert Weaver weighing in with a good morning, Roll Tide. Good night, Weaver. We'll be right back.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Doug Dean, we're going to head up from Birmingham. You would take 59 to Chattanooga and 75 and head into Knoxville, home of Tennessee Volunteers, and Pilot gas stations. And up on the Strip, you can go get some of those death dogs. I once ate 3 of them about 3 in the morning in college, and I paid for it the next day, man. I mean, it was hard to walk. But Vince, you've probably been up since, I'm going to guess, 4 a.m., because you do a 3-hour show before you come on here. And Doug and I both, and everybody listening, thank you. And let me say this. I've got a bunch of questions already coming in from Tennessee fans. And the first one is, thank you for providing Vol coverage, because in Memphis, and of course we're all over on the web, but we want to hear about the Vols and who are the freshmen that are standing out in practice to this point that you expect to play, as they say down in the Deep South, Saturday night. And Vince also, let me say this, as Doug pointed out earlier, our prayers are with everybody down there on the Nature Coast, North Tampa and North, because I know you're from Tampa. So Franz Beard was on yesterday from Gatorbait Media, and hurricanes they're no fun, but I hope your family's all prepared and ready. They're in our prayers.
Yeah, appreciate that. Always great to talk to you guys. Yeah, Tampa, they've gotten some bad weather, but nothing like the direct hit of a hurricane, like up in that Big Bend area, the Cedar Key area, and so they're doing okay under the circumstances. But I appreciate that, and just so many beautiful beachfront communities that just always get devastated. And it's happening again. It's just so sad, but. To answer the question from your listener, there were 7 true freshmen on the depth chart that was released early this week, and we know what those are. They're not absolutes, and there's still stuff that's going to be sorted out once you get into game situations. But to me, the one guy that was talked about the most was Nico, but there was no quarterback controversy at Tennessee in the offseason or in camp. So Nico will play if the game gets out of hand in the second half. I don't expect them to mix him in or have some series for him if the game is still on. I would be surprised if that happens. They only have 2 scholarship quarterbacks, so they trust Nico, but I don't think that's going to happen. The guys that I think you will see get some rotation and playing time in, even though they're none that are starters, it starts with Arian Carter. He'll be wearing number 7 on that Tennessee defense. He's a backup will linebacker right now. It's so incredible to see his teammates compliment him and how he fills a hole, how athletic he is. He was a running back commit at one point in the recruiting class to another school. So he is incredibly athletic, and he's going to put on more weight and just be a monster in this league. So explosive. So he's going to get some playing time, especially once the game gets out of hand. Another one that's done really well is David Hobbs. He's a 5-star defensive tackle. And he was one of the big gets for Tennessee in the recruiting class, obviously as a 5-star, but from North Carolina. And they're pretty deep. That was one of the storylines of camp is they developed depth at tackle. Know about Amari Thomas, but then they added Omar Norman Lott, the transfer from Arizona State. Bryson Eason has been really good. We've seen Elijah Simmons lose some weight, play. Croc Garland started some games, and then you add David Hobbs too, who has been impressive. Just a big body that's crazy athletic. So I think Hobbs is another one you'll see playing time. Jeremiah Thielander, who is a backup Mike linebacker. He was a 3-star, but son of a coach at a 5-star. So his instincts are showing out. He's a tackling machine, kind of a see-ball, hit-ball guy. And then Caleb Herring, potentially in one of those outside rush spots. He's joined that group along with second-year guys, James Pierce Jr. and Joshua Josephs, to try to have super athletic guys that can be disruptive, get them off the field on third down, get those key turnovers. So there's a few others. Cameron Seldon at running back would be another one that I would expect to get some playing time, and maybe the most so in the kick return game.
Hey, I just want to say it's good to see you, sir. I wish the Vols a great season. I was telling Rob, but I absolutely want Florida and Tennessee and others for that matter in the SEC East to play great football. and I will be freely admit that's so that the competitive field is more even for the defending national champion. Next year, I guess that matters a little less because we won't have divisions. Unless they do add that back in later in pods or something. But, such an easy year to follow for Josh Heupel, right? Tongue firmly in cheek. All he's got to do is match what last year was the number 1 ranked total offense in all of America. No big deal, right?
Not at all. First 11-win season since 2001. I mean, there's been a lot of that where they've done things that a lot of the school hadn't done before, and then people around the country just haven't gotten to the level of offense that they have. They had some special players, of course, that are in the NFL now, in Hendon Hooker, Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman, Darnell Wright, and those are 4 top 3 round draft picks, and all I think are going to have really good NFL careers. But they still have a lot of talent. They have talent at quarterback in Joe Milton III. They have talented wide receiver where I think they're actually, in terms of numbers of guys that they believe in, they're even deeper than they were a year ago. And the offensive line, they brought in John Campbell Jr. from Miami, who part of the pitch to him was that you could do what Darnell Wright did, put it all together your last year. You have a similar frame and athleticism, start at tackle, put it on tape, and then you can get to the NFL as a high draft pick. And he's had a great camp and locked down that left tackle spot. So that's why I think it's still going to be a very good Tennessee offense. Number 1, I don't know about that yet. We probably have to see the offensive line come together. Looks like they're going to be without Cooper Mays in the opener. He's missed much of camp. Tennessee hasn't made an official statement on that. I don't expect him to play. And we'll see what kind of drop-off there is. I think there will be. But, unless that offensive line takes a massive step back, I still think this offense is going to be very, very good. Even if it's not number 1, it's still going to be tough to handle, and especially with the tempo that people aren't used to seeing.
You never want to look ahead, but I know that every Florida and obviously Tennessee fan is looking ahead to September 16th. You got Virginia. I know Heupel will have them ready and not overlook. What is Tennessee, a 28-point favorite at home? So it is at home. Am I right?
Nashville. It will be a home game in essence, but it's in Nashville. Yeah.
So Tennessee, Florida on the 16th. I talk about the Tennessee defense. If you, as would be reasonable to expect, there's just a modest drop off in production offensively, at least first half of the season, while they debug things. And if they don't, if they just pick up where they left off, Tennessee's dangerous this year. Do you expect the defense to show some improvement this year?
I do, for a couple of reasons. And honestly, I think the defense needed to improve regardless of where the offense was, even if it's just as good as last year. If you want to take that next step and really be in contention for a college football playoff, gotta have better defense. And they were, some games they played a good part in them winning. The Pittsburgh game last year, LSU, they were outstanding. The Orange Bowl against Clemson. So there were games where the defense played good enough to win, especially with that kind of offense. It's just some games when they were really bad couldn't always overcome that, including that South Carolina loss. So they just have to eliminate the horrific games and then be a little bit better in creating turnovers and getting off the field on third down. National championship contending teams have an elite quarterback, a high-level offense, and highly rated difference makers on defense that can get you key stops when you need it, even if you give up a fair amount of yards. You don't have to be Georgia's defense every year. And who is in today's college football besides them? So I think, one, they're healthier. The secondary, which is the biggest problem last year, they were banged up and going to freshmen that weren't ready to be out there. And they have more talent there now, too. They added Gabe Giuliani, who came over from BYU, actually played against Tennessee when he was at Vanderbilt prior to BYU. They signed 5 freshmen in the signing class, and all 5 have been with the team since the bowl practices. It's another little advantage that Tennessee had. They had 16 players participate in the Orange Bowl practices. So then they already know what's going on for spring practice. So now you get to the summer, and some of those guys are 2 steps behind the guys that were there. So it's almost like they're almost sophomores to this point, although the games matter and as the biggest teaching tools. But it's a big advantage to have so many guys that have been here so long. And so I think there'll be some talent. Now, some of those guys aren't going to be ready from the jump. And there's the competition aspect of it too. Coaches love it. They want you to fight and scratch and claw and not feel comfortable. And so they have more of that. Transfers are a big part of them. I mentioned Gabe Giuliani. We got transfer from BYU, Keenan Peely, who will be a starting linebacker. And I think Peely and Aaron Beasley will be one of the better linebacking duos in the SEC. He has been really impressive. And if they didn't have him, they'd have to play a first or second year guy that probably wasn't ready to go alongside of Beasley. And then on the D line, they added Omar Norman Lott. I mentioned him earlier. He's a transfer from Arizona State. He's had a great camp. He could very well start next to Omari Thomas. He's got a high motor and skill set and a big body. And so transfers are playing a big role in why I think some people may be anticipating Tennessee taking a step back. But a lot of the transfers, offense and defense, are going to play key big roles. And I think they're good transfers to where you could see a improvement on defense and not the drop off necessarily on offense, or at least not too much.
Gents, I got to bounce. Y'all have a great week.
All right,
Appreciate
Doug,
it.
thanks so much. We'll see you down on the plains, man. Take care.
Yeah.
Vince, looking at it, I guess there's 2 stats I'm going to throw at you. Offensively, last year in the first half, Tennessee outscored opponents like 337 to 150. So they hit you in the mouth early, and you're bleeding at halftime. And if you can't recover, it gets really ugly. Number 2, the run defense, and that's when you have Rodney Garner coaching your defensive line, the big guy. I mean, he's got 45 of his players have gone on to the NFL. Those numbers, pretty soon he'll be celebrating 50. Coach G, the legend of Leeds, Alabama, Charles Barkley's first cousin. But the second best run defense in the SEC, but you just referred to it. He gave up 289 yards a game, something like that. And you mentioned those secondary guys. But if your pass rush is good, their life is a lot less miserable. And so, again, you've got Omari Thomas. How deep is your front 7? Are you 2 and 3 deep across that front 7, SEC caliber, and some all SEC difference makers?
Well, you make great points, Rob. Especially on Rodney Garner, man, he coaches them hard, but they know that he loves them and he impacts them, and then they're loyal to him. coaching hard, yelling and screaming and all that kind of stuff. Man, they are thank him afterwards. It may suck in the moment, but they thank him afterwards. And this is a really good group. Now, you mentioned the front seven, and to answer your question, I would divide it. They have great depth on the D line. They have young depth, unproven depth at linebacker. It's Peely and Beasley. And then after that, you got some really talented guys. Arion Carter, who is answering the question and mentioned, he's going to be so good for Tennessee. Mike linebacker Elijah Herring in his second year. T-Lander, Caleb Perry in his second year. They got some really athletic guys, but are they ready to play? When will they be ready to play? You don't want to have to force them out there before you need it. So it is their body's there, but it's a little dicey if one of those guys goes down. So that isn't they have more depth in terms of bodies, but playing right now to start the season, it's a little TBD right now. Now on the front, I think they rotated 9-10 guys last year. I think they can easily rotate 12 this year. Whether Rodney Garner will decide to do that, we'll see. But they're really good. Like I said, they can rotate 6 just in their 2 inside tackle spots. Then Tyler Barron, who has been in the program, he's a senior now, local kid from Catholic, NFL body if he ever puts it together. He's not even listed as the lone starter at defensive end. Dominic Bailey, who's had a really good camp, he's in there as an oar with him, and they have a talented second-year guy in Tyree West who played some snaps his freshman year. And then the other part of that D-line is the Leo spot. That's where you can create the pass rush. That's where they have those guys I was talking about, Pierce, Josephs, and Herring. Herring is a true freshman, but man, length, crazy athleticism, younger brother of Caleb Herring, who's one of those Elijah Herring is one of those inside backers. And then Roman Harrison's kind of the steady, hardworking guy that's a starting Leo at the moment until one of those other guys take the spot. So much improved depth on the D-line, but I'd say more so that they're going to play early on the front versus the linebackers in that front seven.
Yeah. And in the SEC, you look at the defensive line, the difference makers. You got a guy like Amari Thomas who played at Briarcrest High School where Hugh Freeze once coached in Memphis. Big guy, 6'4", 6'5". Saw him up at Media Days. Wants to go out with a great year. The first 2 years Josh Heupel's been at Tennessee, he's shattered damn near every Tennessee offensive record. And the thing I've noticed with him, a lot of these spread coaches like to do 4 or 5 wideouts in an empty set backfield, but Tennessee can line up and run the ball and impose their will on you. You mentioned Cooper Mays from Catholic. Who does a better job of educating and getting people ready than the Catholic school system? I digress, but I'm just going to say you got some studs on that offensive line. And I'm just looking here and I'm saying to myself, the defensive line, if you've got 12 guys, you can rotate 6 on the interior defensive tackles. Tennessee should be really good. That's 9 or 10 wins. Then let's talk about your running backs, Squirrel and Jabari Wright. Those guys are, they're good. And Brew McCoy at wide receiver. I think Takeo Spikes had his top 5 players you don't want to tackle, that you hate having to tackle. And Brew McCoy may have been, he was in that top 5, but that guy is a big physical athlete. And you look at that Tennessee's roster looks so different than it did 4 years ago, Vince. I can't remember them being this athletic.
They've definitely transformed the roster. And it's not only more athletic because it is, but it's also so much more versatile. A lot of these guys can play multiple positions. They have ends that can slide in the tackle. They have Wills that can play Mikes and Mikes that can play Wills. They have corners that can play safety or star, and all those things work together. They have wide receivers that can play the slot or outside. They have offensive linemen that can bounce from center to guard, left side, right tackle, left tackle. There wasn't a lot of that. What you'd get is coaches moving. So you had coaching instability, and you didn't have players with position versatility. In today's age, with the game moving so fast, you need players to be able to have a new duty from play to play when you can substitute, or mid play. And they don't substitute on offense at wide receiver, so that you have to be ready to go and not cross fields and do all this other crazy stuff and changing positions. But you have guys that are versatile, that can do what's needed as circumstances change. And they look the part. They're more of a Heupel type of roster also in today's modern college football, where they weren't modern college football under Jeremy Pruitt before. You mentioned the running the football. Tennessee really doesn't play a ton of wide receivers. Last year they played 4 because Cedric Tillman was hurt. That was pretty much it. So they rolled with their top guys. Now they have a top 4 this year, but they also have some second-year guys and Chaz Nimrod, who's an Arkansas kid, and also Chaz Nimrod, who's the other one that I'm blanking out on? Caleb Webb is the other one. Yeah, Caleb Webb, Chaz Nimrod. Those guys are second-year track guys. So, but those guys are ready to play and are threats. So I think you could very well see Tennessee be deeper at the wide receiver position. But you were mentioning running the ball versus passing the ball. You know that Tennessee ran the ball more than 100 times more than they threw it last year?
There you go.
They had 523 rushing attempts. They had 422 passing attempts. Yeah. So it's now, part of that was the quarterback position, called pass plays. Hooker ended up running. So there's some of that. I would expect Milton to be in that situation, some, maybe not as frequently as Hooker. But the point is they want to spread you out and then downhill run you. And the calls are based on who's in the box. You mentioned Tennessee with a front 7. Basically, Tennessee on defense is front 6. But if you put 6 in the box, Tennessee's going to run the ball on you. And if you have 7 in the box, they know they have the right matchups on the perimeter with either man coverage or a single high, and then receivers that can get open. So now they're going to throw it over your head. It's a lot of answers to their offense, but they still want to run it down your throat too and spread you out. And now teams, I've heard a lot that teams have put in a lot of focus to try to slow down this Heupel offense in this league in the offseason. Will that happen? Will they be successful? And if they are, will Heupel have adjustments? Typically he does. So it's another interesting thing to kind of follow this year.
Well, something about Josh Heupel that stands out to me is how far out he looks into the future. He doesn't wait for things to happen. He doesn't wait till his house is on fire to call his insurance agent and say, damn, I need some fire insurance. That's something that separates him. You can't break all these records in back-to-back years without evolving. That's the separate. And again, we all talk about Florida, the early years of Steve Spurrier. They'd be throwing the ball in the fourth quarter, and it cost them some games. But then they got Eric Rhett, they got Graham, they got some badasses out there playing, running back, and they actually ran the ball way more than people thought, just like you said with Tennessee. I think the first year that Josh Heupel was at Tennessee, the 21 season, Tennessee went on the road to Missouri, where he had gone there as offensive coordinator when they were 13th or 14th in the SEC, got him up to 1 or 2 for a couple of years. They ran the ball in that road game at Columbia, Missouri, his first year, for 453 yards, if I recall correctly. That's dominating on the line of scrimmage. I mean, you've got to be physical, and it's a mindset. Coaches always will say, you don't just decide Friday night in the team meeting or at the team dinner, or when you're watching, the Boys of Fall movie or something. Hey, we're going to be physical, man. We're going to run the ball. Coach Dye used to always say, that's a state of mind that you wake up with in the morning. And when things start falling apart, you go back to the basics. You watch Kirby Smart in that, how about them dogs? He goes, what you saw out there tonight was an example of physical and mental toughness. And if you got it, that's why you're in this locker room. And if you're thinking about coming to Georgia, you better bring it. Josh Heupel is a lot smarter than people want to give this guy credit for. Look, he's from South Dakota. Not a lot of people out there, but I hunt up there a lot. They love football up there. About 750,000 people in the whole damn state. But they love college football. Guy goes to Oklahoma, runner-up for the Heisman, wins the national championship. The guy, when they hired him, I said, you listen to what he says. I was a big fan of Jeremy Pruitt because of his defensive prowess, but obviously, maybe he went to the Joe Stalin School of Charm. I don't know. But this guy Heupel, because Cousin Mark's son, Will Ham, drove him around last year a lot on the game weekends in his family. Really just a good guy. But he gets football. You and Jimmy Himes, you're there every day. But for the Tennessee fans, I got a lot of them asking me right now going, what about this team is different than last year? And what about Milton? I feel comfortable about Milton, but they're saying, what makes you think Joe Milton can keep this thing going? I think he proved it at the end of last year.
He did. And just real quick to what you were talking about before and him being able to adjust his game plan week to week. They had 31 carries to 362 yards against Vandy in their 56-0 win. They just ran the ball. They had a bunch of long runs, and they didn't need to throw the ball. You saw Joe Milton throw the deep ball a couple of times and be more accurate there, and then he was much better in that Clemson game. But he took that big step. That was a big confidence boost for him. He admitted that into the offseason, and it also quieted any quarterback controversy in the offseason. That helped a lot. That helped us that talk about it every day, that we didn't have to deal with a quarterback controversy or Nico versus Joe. That sucks to go an entire offseason and do that kind of stuff. And it was going to be Joe Milton, and it is. And Nico, they have a lot of trust in him, and if they need him, I think long-term he's going to be great too. But this is Joe Milton's team. Yeah. He is much better than he was 2 years ago. And honestly, Rob, I talked to Tennessee fans. There's some that are not as optimistic, that think they will take a little step back because they point to Joe Milton. There's some that cannot flush what they saw from him 2 years ago. And, running out of bounds against Ole Miss at the end of that game and the overthrows, things like that. He's a much different quarterback. He's a much different person than he was. Oh, by the way, now he's a couple of years into the system. He's got great coaching and technique. His mechanics are different. They've worked with him there to where he's not sore after practice because he's relying on his arm strength. They've worked on his mechanics, so he's using his lower body, and guess what? That's helped him with his accuracy, which is what people talked about. I think Joey Halsey is a perfect coach for him because he's a teacher. He's positive. They've been together for a couple of years. And he's about fun, and he wants the guys to have fun, and that's what Joe Milton does. He's an energy giver on the team, calls himself a servant leader. He gave the entire team Beats by Dre because he worked an NIL deal with Beats, and then he gave everyone these several $100 Beats, and on the card it said, let's go win the East. Yeah. So he's been unbelievable this offseason. I see the off-speed pitch and the short to intermediate throws when we've seen him in practice. He's been very accurate with the deep balls and has great connection with a number of guys. I'm a believer in Joe Milton III this year. He doesn't have to be exactly Hendon Hooker for him to be really successful. He's the key to this team. The difference on whether they get in the conversation for a college football playoff, though, I think that is the defense. They need a little bit better defense to put them over that hump, but to put them in the area where they were last year, Joe Milton is the number one key for that. And I think Tennessee is a 10-2 regular season team because my belief in Joe Milton, and I think Tennessee will have a coaching advantage almost every week this season. That's another thing going back to your point on Josh Heupel.
Yeah. And I know you got to get going. You've been up since 4 o'clock. Like I said, you'd be a natural duck hunter we're here in Memphis, over in Parkin right now in Cross County, Arkansas, at the hunting lodge. But getting up 3:30, 4 o'clock. Some of the guys never go to bed. Go duck hunt, come back, eat a big meal, have a few road sodas, and watch football. Life is great, man, here in Arkansas. But let me tell you what, Vince, thank you as always for taking time out of your day to join us. You have no idea how much we appreciate it. And my phone, I've got so many texts. Can't get to all the questions for you, but people appreciate what you do, okay? And my wife always says about the psychology, junk in, junk out, positive in, positive out. And right. I love your message and stuff like that. And I see great things happening. How can people follow you, keep up with you, and we'll get you back on here next week?
Yeah, I appreciate it. If anyone has any questions that we weren't able to get in or address on our visit today, feel free to hit me up on Twitter at Vince Sports, VINCE Sports. I have a website which I'm going to update with a lot more newer content of some of my broadcasting work, but vincesports.net has a lot of my past broadcasting work, play-by-play, on-camera, radio, all that kind of stuff on there. And I'm going to put some new stuff up there soon. So check that out as well. And then our website, I have a blog on there on balls in the NFL. That's always changing. And then I'll have a preseason prediction. I'll do predictions every week, preseason look ahead, all in the blog section called Vince's View at 991thesportsanimal.com. And then Vince Sports is on all the socials, YouTube channel, Instagram, all that kind of fun stuff. And everyone wants to give me a follow there as well.
All right, we'll do it. We're going to take a quick break from a couple of our sponsors, House Industries in Cherry Valley and Red River Ford in Wynn. Be right back with Coach Houston Nutt on Sidelines.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynn, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
We're back, man, with Coach Houston Nutt. Coach, man, getting you on here, it just means great things are about to happen. We're 24 hours away from the start. You get people fired up. I got a lot of people, they're Hog fans, but they're fans of other schools. You bring the enthusiasm, man. I mean, my wife always says, junk in, junk out, positive in, positive out. But you, I don't know if your degree's in psychology or not, but when we had you on back in December, we were broadcasting over at Red River Ford Toyota in Wynn, and the studio and the showroom was just full of Razorback fans listening, going, I love that guy, Houston Dale Nutt, HDN. But I love what you bring because you never change. You're always fired up no matter what happens. And that's what I love about you. And I watch you on CBS and you speak with such conviction and you believe it. So I got the first questions already come in. You coached out there at Boise for a year before you came back, but altitude, how big a deal is it? And I want to talk about a lot of things, but how big a deal is it to go for Florida from the swamp to Salt Lake City, which is like 4,200 feet? Is that a big deal? And what would you do as a coach to prepare for it?
I don't think it's a major big deal. I don't think it's a big deal. I do think there's something to that, but I think, we had the privilege to coach at Oklahoma State when I was assistant for Pat Jones, and we went to Wyoming, and it had on the field the highest elevated, had the number of feet, elevation. And, we didn't take any pills or any, there's sometimes coaches, they'll get into, some of the trainers will recommend taking something. We didn't do that, and we didn't have a problem. So I think it can be more mental than anything. I think it's all about how you approach things. And it's a road trip. It's a focus trip. It's a very important game. But to answer your question, I don't think it's a major deal. I think it's right here in that mind, and you got to go get ready to play.
Yeah. And I put that up there. You know, players can get better. Auburn baseball coach Butch Thompson said during the year as the team got better in the second half, he said, little memo here to people. It's okay for players to get better.
Yeah.
You played in high school. You played in college. You've coached. And people still like Vince Ferrara said to tell you hello, everybody up on the Sports Animal in Knoxville, said they've had you on the show a number of times. And I just figured Vince was ready to get off because he's been up since about 4:00. And it isn't duck season, which, by the way, starts here in Arkansas November 19th, which is a national holiday, Coach, as you know.
Yes,
I remember, we used to love it when the Razorbacks would play a game on opening weekend at War Memorial Stadium. Remember that? And half the crowd would be wearing camo coming straight out of the dugout. I mean, Arkansas, I love that name, the Razorbacks, but they could have been the Greenheads. We never know. Ben Franklin tried to call the Turkey before we got the bald eagle. But I want to hear what's on your mind. You've had all summer. Yeah. I'm sure you've been preparing for this, but let's let Coach Houston Nutt have at it. And I want to hear what you got to say because I got a lot of people that want to talk with you.
Yeah. Well, this is always, to me, an exciting time. I always get antsy, always wishing I had a team during August. August was the time where it's eat, sleep football. And it's to me, it's the greatest game in the world. I love basketball too, but football, there's something about when you have 11 men on one side of the ball and they have 11. And who's going to be the toughest team, who's going to be the smartest, who's going to take care of the ball. And there's always this hope. Everybody has hope right now today. Everybody's going to win a championship today. And it goes back to a little bit what you said. Which team's going to get better? You either get better or you get worse. Which team's going to stay away from injuries? That's always a big factor too. Who's going to step up? There's some names right now we know on teams that we don't know, but we will know. Because it may be a freshman, maybe a redshirt freshman, maybe a sophomore. So this is what makes this game so great. What's different now is me sitting on the sideline from when I was coaching. Is it's transfer portals, it's NIL, and to see a lot of the teams that they didn't have spring ball with probably half their starters. That's what blows my mind. You got 16, 17 guys. I spoke to a few college football teams, and the first thing the coaches will tell me, we got to get all this thing together. We didn't have them in spring. I said, how many would that be? 17 players, and about 11 of them are going to start. So, it's amazing how moving, it's ever moving, ever changing. But to get that team together in a short period of time in August, man, that's something now.
It really is. And, a lot of teams, we have a couple of guys, Wes Moore, ESPN 103.7 The Buzz in Little Rock on Mondays. We have Dudley Dawson, Hogville.net on Thursdays, covering the Razorbacks for us. And Chris Saxon is one of our sponsors of the Razorback Report. His nephew, Patrick Kudus, looks like he's going to start at right tackle. CBHS over in Memphis, we're all real proud. I'm an alumnus of that school. And, got a Razorback starting. Of course, a bunch of my guys in the Cherry Farm Hunting Club over here in Cross County, they're all listening. They got a bunch of questions for you, but it is a great time of year. And what I don't believe in putting ceilings, and I like to treat the word impossible as motivation. Yeah. And I look at what's going on, say at Arkansas, and that program well, Ole Miss, Boise, Murray, but you got a national perspective very few people have. What are your thoughts on what's going to happen in the Pacific Northwest with the Pac-12? I got to tell you, I'm an Auburn grad, but I love college football all over the country. And got a ton of, relationships with Arkansas people, but I don't want to see that part of the country just fall off the map. Do you?
I don't. It just blows my mind, what's happened with football, with this changing, ever-changing time of jockeying for other teams, the recruiting. Just the fact that UCLA and USC now to think they're going to be Big Ten teams.
Yeah.
It's hard to fathom. Then I hear rumors about maybe Stanford and California or Stanford, somebody else going to go all the way to the ACC. It just makes no sense to me. And so I worry about that part of it a little bit. And even when the first day Rob, the first day that they told me that Texas and Oklahoma were going to the SEC, I really thought that was a April Fool's joke. I said, "There's no way."
Yeah.
And because Oklahoma made it to the Final Four of the championship playoff from the Big 12, and so to take those two brand names and bring them to the mighty SEC, it blows my mind. So to me, it tells me this: stay tuned, because there's more things that are getting ready to happen. But I'm like you. I hate to see Washington State and all these teams just, they don't, they're like orphans. Where are they going? So I hate to see it.
You look now down here, and I don't think any conference in America benefited by more stuff kind of falling in their lap than the Big 12. I was there at SEC Media Days in Hoover, July 20th of 21, when that announcement was made. Jimbo Fisher was up at the podium, and someone broke that story. How convenient, right when Jimbo's coming up to the podium. You could tell he was madder than a wet hen, okay? but I mean, I grew up in Memphis. We were talking the other day about one of my favorite all-time name kickers, Ish Ordonez for Arkansas. Remember him?
The kicker, yeah.
It was unbelievable. But you think about the Big 12, that's good because that's the middle of America, and they're pulling in Arizona State and Arizona, Utah, and Colorado. So that, I think, and then they got BYU the year before, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF. That's crazy what's going on out there.
Unbelievable. I'm really anxious. I got my popcorn and Coke, and I'm really can't wait to watch how this plays out. I'm really curious to see how they'll compete, week in, week out. A lot of those teams are, the UCFs, the Cincinnati's been there.
Yeah.
They've done some good things. But to me, it's the grind of each and every weekend of playing that little bit higher, more depth team. I mean, I'm curious to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and it just blows your mind now. Texas and OU coming in. We had Tyler McComas on from Oak City Norman KREF Radio yesterday, and they did a study, the Chamber of Commerce there in Norman, about the impact of a home game. It's about $11 million in Norman. Wow. In the Big 12. They went to Fayetteville. They went to Lexington, KY, as Joe Dean would say, little string music in Lexington, KY. And then they went to Tuscaloosa. And they said it was about 30 to 35 million for a home game in those places. And you look at that and they're like, wow, man, we're so ready to get in here. Well, Brent Venables, I don't know if you know him or not, but I know that Brent Venables, the coach at Oklahoma, it's a great defensive mind. I mean, he's 10-year run at Clemson was incredible. I just checked. I just got an email. He did not get a football lobotomy, people. They lost 4 of their last 5 games by 3 points. Oklahoma, it's in their DNA, isn't it, Coach? I mean, they know how to win. I don't think there'll be much of a learning curve. Not that it's going to be easy, but they're ready, aren't they?
Well, you go back in the history, all the way back, Bud Wilkerson, Barry Switzer. I mean, you look at the team, tradition is there.
Yeah.
It's a winning program. And so I do think it's going to be tougher in the SEC. There's no doubt in my mind it's going to be tougher. But you're right. I mean, when you look at Oklahoma, you look at the tradition, you look at how they recruit. They keep what they need in Oklahoma, then they go to Texas and get players. And it's always been a good, just competitive program. So I'm looking to see what Brent does. I don't know Brent personally, just watched his work from afar. He does a great job. And I'm anxious to see how Oklahoma responds this year.
Now, the people in Arkansas have such a special place in their heart for Texas. They just love it.
Yes.
Man, oh, my God. I've been out to Austin. My good friend Dave Cody was a sports anchor for about 35 years at Channel 7 out there, and he's on with us a lot. Man, when the Razorbacks back September of 21, 2 years ago, put that WWE curb stomping, it was like Monday Night Wrestling at the Mid-South Coliseum. We needed Gordon Solich calling that game. But lately, Arkansas has just curb stomped Texas. They're coming in the league now. That, I think, I look at high school football, and I've got a copy right here. I'm sure you're familiar with this magazine, the one that comes out every year, Hooters, Arkansas. Yeah. And I think it's been a big boom for high school football in the state of Arkansas. And I think about Wynn High School, March 31st, when that tornado hit. I was in Memphis at the bank in a meeting about 4:30, and it knocked the hell out of Wynn and Little Rock too. You know that.
Oh, I know.
And I got to say this, our listeners and viewers on this show and the members of the Cherry Farm sent in so much money, we had to tell them to stop but we went to Cross County. We went over there the next day. Sheriff David West and all those people over there, unbelievable in Wynn. This state of Arkansas, off the charts.
Yes.
Darlene and Walter Hill, Fannie Mae's Barbecue. For 4 straight weekends, we went over there. MJ one time, one of our members, cooked 377 burgers for those people. You look at Wynn, no complaining, just doing. We met a lot of people. I just got to give them credit. Chad House, our good friend, one of our sponsors, House Industries there. And you know where Cherry Valley is. Been a few Razorbacks come from there over the years. You know every one of these little towns in Arkansas.
Yes,
I love them. I absolutely love them. But look at the high school, just gone. I mean, but Dudley Dawson's trying to hit all 200 plus high schools. He's going to hit Fearless Fridays and all. But talk about what this means to high school football in the great state of Arkansas, ultimately up to college level.
Well, it means so much. You mentioned all those great towns. You can bet this. That's why I always looked at it as a Razorback coach. In those cafes, in those towns, and those coffee shops, they're talking about the Razorbacks. So you want to get players from your home, and all that information Dudley Dawson and the guys do. What a great job of keeping up with all those players. And that's where, to me, during our 10 years, we did a really good job of maybe not a 5-star, but Bo Lacey from a Newport, a Dan Doty. You look at these guys that you turn over rocks, and they had this heart for a Razorback. They were tough, and they would fight you. Yep. And what's amazing is these guys from all those towns that you mentioned, Rob, these guys would elevate the play of those 4-stars from Texas and Georgia. They raised the play, man. And so that's what you love about all that. You keep that information of all these high schools. You keep up with them. And to me, that's where it starts as a Razorback coach. It starts right here at home. And they may not always get that publicity and may not be a 5-star, but watch closely because you got to measure that heart.
Well, I've said this. One of my favorite players, Scott Paulo, one of my good friends from Little Rock, played at Parkview, and Keith Jackson was his tight end. He said, man, the toughest, scariest place we ever played is I was a quarterback. Keith Jackson was my tight end, was Pine Bluff Dollarway. He said that was a scary place to play because we were in the locker room before we came out on the field. It was just boom, 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 boom. I mean, great high school football. I always remember my Aunt Nancy, they lived in Stuttgart for 8 or 9 years before they moved to Memphis in the early 70s. She said on a Saturday when the Hogs are playing, you can't go out to eat because there's nobody to help you serve because they're watching the Razorbacks play. Just the way it is. Those towns like Ulam and Gillette, I know, I'm a duck hunter, so I know these towns in Arkansas, but you go back and I think about what it means to the people in this state. You got less than 3 million people, and that's something that you really connected on. I mean, you were like an evangelist, like a Billy Graham roadside revival, because you ignited passion in the fans. Isn't that what college football is all about? I mean, in the pros, you get a paycheck, you lose a game. Yeah, you're mad. But if you're going home and you're making $5 million a year, it's different. But when you got a guy like a Weston Dacus from Searcy, Arkansas, who's one of my favorite Razorbacks of all, just an absolute badass, okay, from Searcy. And you think about now Wyatt Simmons from over there, whose dad coaches at Harding, he just committed to the Razorbacks. I mean, but you think about those kind of guys, Grant Morgan out of Greenwood.
Yes.
I mean, those are the guys that would crawl on their bellies and going up the pig trail to wear that Razorback jersey. As a coach, you just said it. They make other people around them play better. But I don't believe in ceilings. And I think Arkansas, the harder they keep pushing, they're going to break through.
I believe that wholeheartedly. I always have. And again, it's not easy because I think it's the greatest conference in America. But the thing about Arkansas that you hit on, all these little towns and all these guys that grew up, there wasn't a professional team in Arkansas.
Yeah, that's right.
And so their professional team was the Arkansas Razorbacks. And so that's what you're talking about. And I love Friday night football. I love high school football. I get excited about it. And I wanted to keep everybody in state. I wanted to keep them all here,
Yeah.
And so when you do that, and then you go outside, because you can't sign 25 from Arkansas, but you can. We try to make that number around 10, sometimes 12, 14. And to me, there's nothing like that when you have those homegrown. If you look at the history of Arkansas, is when they won championships, your offensive line in the trenches, your offensive line, defensive line, well, the majority were from Arkansas.
Yeah.
And so I think that tells you a lot, because playing in the trenches, that's a big boy league. When you're down there in the trenches in the line of fire, they were the backbone. So I always appreciate that.
Well, and it's true. And, we talk about Patrick Kudus. I mean, Memphis, we consider ourselves TAMs, Tennesseans, Arkansas, and Mississippi. I mean, my mother's parents are from Helena down in the Delta. Okay. So, I mean, they've been in Arkansas since the 1840s. That's what this state is. And you were at Ole Miss, that Mississippi. I mean, there's a connection that the people have, and it's a spiritual, temporal connection, just like the great, the fugitive poets back in the 1920s wrote about the agrarians, the South. You go to a game, and you used to talk about this, Razorback fans. And I heard Pat Bradley, the shooter, talking about it when the Razorbacks from up there in Boston, and he gave this description before the Razorbacks played Gonzaga 2 years ago, and they knocked them off in that game. They beat them that Thursday night, number 1 seed in the whole tournament. He said, I see the Razorbacks. He said, I'm from up in Boston, Denham, Mass. He said, but you got a guy in Arkansas, down in El Dorado or Texarkana, or down there in Dumas or whatever. And he goes, he doesn't have a lot, but he's got that Razorback flag in his front yard. And that means a lot to him. And that, I want to ask you this. You have to go to New York City. You have to go up there with CBS, but you do a great job because you love what you do. And I talked to Roman Harper, and I've gotten to know him the last year. He goes, I have the greatest job in the world. I'm married. I got 4 young kids, and I get paid to talk about football.
Right.
You have the enthusiasm of a college kid, Coach. And I mean that in a good way, because my dad is 95, mom's 88. He's listening to this show right now. And if I make one mistake, he's going to catch me on it, But he's old enough to remember he was 5 years old when the SEC was founded. But 5 years before he was born, the Southern Conference had 23 schools. We've been here before. The free market will fix it. We're Americans. We always get through this stuff. But it's kind of crazy watching it happen, isn't it?
No question about it. Now, the one thing, CBS, I'm not going back this year. I had 2 more years on my contract, but I got 2 grandsons now. So, Rob, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to be able to watch some Friday night football. I'm going to be able to watch some Saturday football. I've never been to a tailgate. So there's a lot of things I'm going to get to do, man. I'm excited about it. Yeah, God. I'm pumped up. So, but I really appreciate CBS. They've been so good to me. They really wanted me to finish out. This is the last year CBS is tied in to the SEC. And I'm going to miss that window. I always thought CBS, that Saturday afternoon game, I love when our teams had that window. CBS, man. And so I'm going to really miss that. It's not even going to be right with not an SEC team on that Saturday afternoon for CBS.
Yeah.
But I really thank the crew, the Kevin Carters, Brent Stover, Adam Zucker, Brian Jones, Danny Cannell, all these guys really were good, and from the researchers on, and they love football. But I tell you what, I'm excited about the year, though. It's upon us now, and it's time to go.
Well, and I know that's the last year. We saw Rick Neuheisel at Media Days, and we have him on the show sometimes. And it's a family. Like my kids are, the boys are 23 and 24, and then my daughter 27 and 34. And I got Auburn, I got Alabama. I'm married to Evolve for life. I got Arkansas, I got Jim Cherry, Michael Sagg, Robert Hill, Scott Paulo, Tommy Christenberry, all these Razorbacks listening right now. And I'm telling you, you're going to be down here on Saturdays, and you just hit on it. You love your family about more than anybody I've ever heard. I mean, your brothers, your dad. I remember when growing up in Memphis, man, when you'd be on the radio with George Lapidus talking over that's how you want to model it. You talk about it. A friend of mine was one of the photographers there, producers at Channel 3, and he said, the man has a Rolodex that the president of the United States would be envious of. And he used to have you on his show a lot.
Yes.
Are you going to be, please tell me that, I mean, you got family's the most important thing, God, family, and everything else falls after that. But you are going to be doing something. I hope you'll be visible and out there, because you help push a positive narrative. I can't stand negative people. If Meet the Press had been around when the light bulb was invented, they would have lamented the death of the candle.
Hey, I love your attitude, and I am. I'm gonna be doing some more segments in radio, and I'm speaking to groups. But this gives me time with family. It was 22 straight weeks to New York from leave Thursday, come back Sunday. That was pretty tough, but that's a grind. But I'm excited about a little bit more free time to be able to go, physically go to a game. So I'm excited about that.
All right, we just got a couple of minutes, and I'll let you go. I want to say I'm getting a lot of people, actually people from Dave Cody sitting there going, man, great get on Houston Nutt. And my sons tell me this too about CBS. They go, Vern Lundquist, we had him on the show last year, lives out in Steamboat Springs. Just that voice, and at 2:30, and my son Wilson lives up in Charlotte now, graduated from Auburn a year ago. He goes, that was iconic. Grand Bob is what they call my dad, and Max and all of us watching the games. Now, he goes, I heard some words. I still don't understand what they meant when y'all were watching the games. It's fun, but the guys on CBS, that's right. What will you do? I mean, the grandchildren, most important, but you're young enough, you're a young guy. You're still going to be visible, aren't you, in college football? I hope you are not ever going to go away.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you saying that. I appreciate your words. I'll still do radio segments, and I speak to groups. This frees me up on weekends, which I hadn't had in a long time, and I have to get used to it. But, with I have a 2-year-old grandson and a 7-month-old. Can't wait to get with them. Yeah. And so Diana and I, we'll have a little bit more freedom to go physically to a game, to watch games, Friday night high school games. Yeah. And I'm excited about that. But there will always be around football because you love it so much.
Well, I just want to say this. We want to get you back on in the fall to talk football if you'll do it. And I appreciate, I love your priorities, man. I don't think people realize the sacrifice that Thursday to Sunday, and you may not get a flight at it. If there's bad weather, you may be stuck for days. I don't care what age you are. I remember as a kid going to the airport to get my dad every Friday. He goes, I had no idea where I was till I read the local paper. You know how that is when you're on the road and you're in New York City. But we value you and as a man and as a coach, and appreciate more than we can tell you coming on here. Let people know how they can follow you and what's important if you've got some causes that you care about, and we will spread the word. But again, thanks for being on here with us, Coach Nutt.
Man, I sure appreciate you. I'm at CBS Coach Nutt, and follow me there. And then I'll be following you guys as well now. And so it's football season. Let's go.
Absolutely. Coach Houston Nutt's been our guest. Have a great day, Coach. And we'll take a quick break and be right back with Jordan Hill, 24/7 Sports on Georgia.
Thank you, buddy.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Browne back here with you, man. Great stuff, as always. When you get Houston Nutt on here, it's fun. And let me tell you something. We're not one of these I got you moments, I got you shows that goes out there and wants to ask questions to anybody. I'm going to tell you what, when I get coaches on here, I want to hear their positive message. Someone may have remembered a call in a game of somebody or something. Who cares? That was years ago. I love getting on a coach like Houston Nutt because I don't care who you're a fan of. That guy could get you fired up to walk the green mile. I mean, that's what you love about coaches. And then here it is with all that he's accomplished. And you think about that. And great stuff, Dave Cody, you're right. Thinking of the folks in Gainesville and Valdosta as this hurricane looks like it's going to rip through there. I'll be keeping them in my prayers for sure. And Jordan Hill, 24/7 Sports, down in the Classic City. Jordan, what do you got? Hey, we got about the final segment here, but great stuff with Coach Houston Nutt. And I hate, that he's not going to be on CBS, but you got to love a man that's got a couple of grandchildren now. And he goes, you know what? I know CBS wanted me to finish out the contract, but I want to spend more time with my grandchildren. And he goes, I've never been to a tailgate. Think about that. I mean, what he's sacrificed as a coach. Yeah, they get paid well and all, but think about that. Going to high school football games and all like that. You talk about a positive man. He is, and so is Jordan Hill. And I'm positive of this. Tony Barnhart was up here Monday night, Touchdown Club of Memphis. Join people, great organization. And he talked about PowerPoint presentation. He got through all the stuff, when he came down to Georgia 37, Ohio State 34 for the national championship. Long way to go to get there. Let's talk about practice. What's going on over between the railroad tracks and the Oconee River and the Classic City?
Yeah, everything's been good this week. Seems like everything is going to plan. They've had a few guys banged up these last few weeks, but it sounds like it's a pretty positive prognosis for most of those guys, namely Dejon Edwards and Kendall Milton. The question's been about running back, and they may play it safe and not play those guys much or play them at all on Saturday, but I think they're trending in the right direction. It's going to be hard to really glean a lot about this team early in the season. You play UT Martin, you play Ball State. You do have South Carolina at home, which we'll learn a lot about in week 3, but then you turn around and play UAB. So it's one of those things. I think the priority right now is this team just getting healthy across the board. The indications so far are pretty good, but we know once you get into a game, you're going to get those bumps and bruises, and they want to be in good shape, especially by the time they get into SEC play.
Yeah, and Tony Barnhart brought this up, and I'm going to throw it at you. Everybody's talking about a three-peat. Look how close that game was against Ohio State. It's a field goal at the end of the game. I mean, look how different things could be. That's why everybody's talking about, this schedule's so easy. It doesn't matter. It's about Georgia looking inside and getting better themselves, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and I think that the margin for error for any team that's going to win a national championship is very, very slim. I mean, they were on the ropes against Missouri. I mean, Mevis hits like a 55-yard field goal, and they're down 10 with like 10 minutes left in the game. And all of us in the press box are sitting there thinking they're going to lose. They had not moved the ball well in that game. And then you mentioned the Peach Bowl. I mean, you have to wonder, and I'm sure Ohio State fans have, if Ryan Day didn't play it so conservative late in that game, they basically decided, all right, we're going to just settle for this long field goal. They had moved the ball very quickly on Georgia, gassed Georgia defense, which you can understand after 4 quarters of playing the Buckeyes. But yeah, it takes about as much luck as it takes talent, because, they always say that the football, it doesn't bounce the same way. If you, don't get the breaks you need. I mean, and think about all the teams we can think about just in the past few years that were championship caliber that, had a loss here or there that knocked them out. So, yeah, I mean, the margin for error if you're going to win a national championship is so slim. That's part of what has made these back-to-back championships for Georgia so special, is people understand how difficult that is to do. No one had done it in the college football playoff era. And if they are able to get to 3, I mean, it's something that I don't see happening again. I mean, I think it's just so hard, and the competition is so fierce in all the conferences. To have this run of dominance, it's really hard to really think about, because it is a very rare feat, and something that people have celebrated, and rightfully so.
Yeah, and with Georgia, people for a couple of years, how are we going to win with Stetson Bennett? How are we going to do it? Now they're going to be asking, how are we going to win without Stetson Bennett? Okay, Carson Beck out of Jacksonville, Florida. Home of Leonard Skinner in 38 special, I might add. And you think about Carson Beck, when Kirby Smart was asked how long he'd been there, he said 2, I think 3 years. He goes, but he's a product of what we do here. He's mentally, physically tough enough to stick it out. And he could have quit. He could have transferred. So could Gunnar Stockton and Brock Vandegrift. But they didn't. They're staying because they want to be part of something special. And I think you notice among the elite programs, there's not a lot of turnover. Hell, what was that? You know what stat nobody's talking about, Jordan? What were the number of guys that transferred out we never heard about before the portal? Now, when you do it, it goes into a computer matrix and everybody knows it. But it's always been going on, hadn't it?
Definitely. And, it's funny thinking about it now. When you go back to the Mark Richt era, everybody was convinced DJ Shockley should have transferred because David Green was in front of him. And, he waited his time, and it wound up really working out for DJ. They won the SEC title in 2005, and he's still a huge fixture in the program. But, yeah, I mean, these guys have had their sights set on what they wanted. We've talked to Carson Beck and basically asked him, how close have you gotten to transferring, over these last few years? And he said, early on, you're a freshman and sophomore. You're like, man, this is hard. This is tough. He said, but, I've grinded it out and I wanted to stay. I love the camaraderie at Georgia. I love my teammates. He wanted to wait and get his turn. And, I don't think you could really be upset had he left. You go back to the 2021 season, going into the UAB game when JT Daniels was banged up. There were a lot of rumors that, okay, they're going to turn it over to Carson at least while JT's hurt. Well, they don't do that. They turn it over to Stetson instead. And, sort of the rest is history. You could sort of see in that moment or over the course of that season of him saying, I should have started. This isn't fair. I'm going to leave and kind of start a new chapter, but he didn't. And I think he's a really driven guy. I'm looking forward to on Friday. I'm going to have a profile on Carson, talk to some of his high school coaches down there in Mandarin High School in Jacksonville, and some of the teammates around him in Athens, just about the kind of guy he is and what Georgia fans are getting ready to see. I think he's got a chance to have a really, really strong junior season and have a chance again to put Georgia in the national title hunt and see if they can go back to back to back.
Tight end, we know about Brock Bowers, 1,824 yards in 2 years for the junior out of Napa, California, 19 touchdowns, and then like 9 carries, 111 yards, 3 touchdowns. Those are numbers that are so off the charts, off the chain, as my kids would call it. And then you've got Ladd McConkey, Dominic Lovett, wide receivers. As many great football players as Georgia's had, we all know there's only been 1,000-yard wide receiver, not tight end, but wide receiver. And that is Robert Edwards out of Waco, Washington County down in Sandersville, where the Kayla is in the ground, where they make makeup. That's what it's famous for. Ladd McConkey, one of the great names, Dominic Lovett. Either one of them capable? Are they going to be called upon to do that this year? Or is the running back room typical Georgia, deep, strong, and fast?
I think if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be Brock Bowers, and that's really no disrespect to Ladd or Dominic Lovett, who I think both will have very productive seasons. But it's going to be one of the things to watch over this first month is just to see who Carson Beck leans on, because he may not throw to certain receivers like Stetson Bennett did, and vice versa. He may throw more to guys than Stetson did with certain individuals. But I think that Brock's going to be a guy that he knows, especially early in the season, hey, I can throw it to 19. And we were talking about this on a podcast on Tuesday, just about how many touchdowns we think Browne. I think it's going to be really fascinating once they start getting in the red zone. If I'm Carson Beck, I'm like, hey, where's number 19? I'm just going to throw it up there and see if he can go get it. So I think if anyone does it, it'll be Brock Bowers. He's come close the last couple of years, but I think he can hit 1,000 yards. And I think the next guy up is Dominic Lovett, and that's no disrespect to Ladd, but I think Dom has a chance to have a very, very strong season and to be very productive in his first year after coming over from Missouri.
25 players last 2 years, 15 off the 21 national championship team, 10 off the 22 national championship team, and a bunch of free agents. Is the talent, it doesn't look like it's dropped off any. I think on the blue chip index, Georgia's 1 or 2. It's them, Bama, and Ohio State. But Kirby Smart, this question was asked at the Touchdown Club Monday night. Is Georgia, if Georgia wins it, does Kirby Smart replace Nick Saban as the greatest coach in college football? Tony Barnhart said no, because he's got to win 7 to do that. But bottom line, it's about to he thinks it's going to happen. And Minnesota did it back in the 30s. Bernie Beeman, whatever, was the coach. I didn't know. I wasn't around then. But Georgia is – and that's something Kirby Smart, you're around him a lot. Everybody's telling him how great they are. And you see how he finds excuses to motivate them? That's the genius of Kirby Smart. And he learned that from his father and Nick Saban.
Yeah, I mean, I think he hates it anytime. It was funny on Monday. One of the reporters there was like, Kirby, I know you don't really like harping on, the future and like setting up a question about the three-peat. And Kirby's like, correct, you're right. And he's like, but you're going to ask it anyway. And the reporter did. But, he's a guy that understands that he can't let guys get complacent. And I do think, and I've talked about this quite a bit, when you look at this Georgia team, something that helps, and really helps at the college level is, every year there's going to be turnover, whether it's guys who go on to the NFL, if you do have a few guys transfer out. So you're going to have new faces no matter what. It's not like the NFL and you can, sign everybody back and bring a whole offense back. It's a situation where you got guys stepping up into bigger roles, and I think that helps. I think that sets it up. Where you've got new starters. And, it was funny a few weeks ago talking to Oscar Delp, who's just a sophomore, and he was asked about the three-peat. And, he acknowledged, obviously, that winning those 2 championships for Georgia, that's a big deal. But he said, I was still in high school when they won the first one. It's not like, I've been here for all of them. And he said, I didn't play very much last year. His biggest moment really was stepping in the Peach Bowl when Darnell Washington got hurt. But he was like, I want to go out there and win my own. And that's what Carson Beck has said as well is, there's a difference between being on a national championship team and being a national champion. And I think that helps Kirby Smart's job so much as you've got a number of guys who, have been around a championship program, maybe got some reps here and there, but they weren't the reason Georgia won the national championship. They contributed along the way, but they weren't, the driving force. So I think that helps Kirby's job tremendously is you got a lot of talented guys, but they haven't proven themselves quite at this level as national champions. That makes those guys hungry. And I think that's part of why we, see the season playing out like it could, that Georgia will have a legitimate shot to go win another national championship.
And I'm getting questions I'm getting here from some Georgia fans. And I know I met David Jolly, Touchdown Club in Memphis Monday night, big Georgia fan from Fairhope, Alabama, but big Georgia fan and loves the dog. He's got season tickets, lives in Memphis, lives in Germantown. And you're talking about the defensive front. Georgia's defense has been so good the last few years. How deep are they on that front 7 this year? The seasons change, the names change, but the talent stays the same or better.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, when you look at this team, the 2 areas where I think it will determine if Georgia is national title, has the potential to go win another national title, is running back, which we've talked about, and that's mainly because of injuries, and probably interior defensive line because they lost Jalen Carter. And, they've got a lot of guys, and they got a lot of guys who have played quite a bit of football. 3 seniors, Warren Brinson, Zion Logue, Nazir Stackhouse. But they're counting on those guys to play quite a bit and to play bigger roles, not having Jalen Carter out there anymore. I think they're capable, and I think that they've got what really helps them is they've got a number of options between those 3 guys. Jordan Hall, who's a freshman from Jacksonville, who's gotten a lot of buzz, and a few other guys that are kind of more depth pieces, like Jamal Jarrett, like Jonathan Jefferson, and also Christian Miller, who's going to be a sophomore this season. I think they're in good shape, but I think it is fair when you look specifically at that defensive line to have questions and to need to see it, to see those guys kind of put it together. I think they're in good shape. They don't have a game record like number 88. I think Jalen Carter is one of those once-in-a-lifetime defensive linemen. I mean, he was just freaky. Even when he was playing alongside guys like Trayvon Walker and Jordan Davis, in that mix, people were still saying, hey, those guys are good, but that number 88 is going to be something special. They don't have a Jalen Carter, but I think they're in good shape, and I think you're going to see this defensive line get the job done and for those veterans to really step up.
All right. Of the freshmen, this is another question coming in this class, which one of the best 2 or 3 in the country, who is standing out in practice, and what true freshman do you think will play in the first game? I mean, obviously it's against UT Martin, and I imagine a lot of them will play, but who's really leading the pack?
I think Jordan Hall's gotten a lot of buzz. I don't see him starting just because they have so many experienced guys, but I think he'll play as the season goes on. I think you'll see him play a bigger and bigger role. Pierce Sperlin, one of the tight ends, he's really stepped up with Lawson Lucky banged up. He's probably still 3rd among the tight ends behind Brock Bowers and Oscar Delp, who I mentioned earlier. CJ Allen is a guy at inside linebacker that's gotten a lot of buzz. I could see him playing quite a bit on Saturday behind some of those veteran guys. Jonel Aguero, who was a 5-star safety, they've had him playing the star. He's been a little banged up in fall camp, but I really think once we get into the season, he has a chance to start and a chance to play a big role. And one other guy out there is Roderick Robinson. We talked about running back. They've had guys banged up. Had a really good spring. Sounds like he's coming along in fall. Had a good fall camp. Del McGee told us, they're still kind of cultivating him, kind of growing him, getting him up to speed. But Roderick looked the part back at G-Day. And given, the fact we may not see some of those top running backs, I could see Roderick playing quite a bit and being somebody they lean on this year.
Yeah. So Todd Monken has gone on to the NFL. And now you're going to have Mike Bobo, who's familiar. I mean, he was there at Georgia 14 years with Mark Richt. The year he left to go take the head coaching job at Colorado State, they struggled. All right. And I look and I think to myself, it's going to be different, but how different will the offense look? Because they've got so much talent. You got to have the players, and they got a guy that knows how to call plays.
And something that Mike said during fall camp when we had a chance to talk to him, I think it sums up this offseason and some of the worries that Georgia fans have. He was asked about the offense. He said, it's going to look different, but it probably would have looked different if Todd was standing up here talking to you right now instead of me. And, it all comes down to a very simple mindset and philosophy for coaches, which is to get your best players on the field and get them the football. Last year they were super deep at tight end, having Brock and Darnell Washington, a lot of 12 personnel, a lot of 2 tight end sets out there. And they still have talent at tight end behind Brock, but there's not a Darnell Washington on this team, and I don't think anybody would deny it. And then on the other side, they are super deep at receiver. I could name you 6 or 7 receivers, and you could sort of, match them up at the different receiver positions. But any SEC team would feel good with those guys. You'd say, okay, we feel good about having this guy out here and us being able to beat whoever else in the conference. Because of that, I think you're going to see more 3 receiver sets. I think you're going to see them try to utilize a talent there. And I don't think that's a Mike Bobo thing. I think that's a Georgia thing. I think that's a situation where they understand that they're super deep at receiver. That's not to say we're not going to see some 2 tight end sets, because I think Oscar Delp is coming along and kind of ready to be that next Brock Bowers whenever Brock leaves. But I think you're going to see a whole lot more of those 3 receiver sets, getting those guys out there, because One thing that Carson does have on Stetson, he's got a stronger arm, bigger guy. I mean, that's just sort of natural. I could see them trying to air it out, letting him show off that big arm and letting those wide receivers go down the field and get open.
Yeah. And you look historically at Georgia, they'll dominate their state for recruiting. And they're doing it now. They're getting who they want for the most part. But Kirby's going out again. Brock Bowers, Napa, California, Darnell Washington, Las Vegas, Keely Ringo, Scottsdale, Phoenix area. I mean, go down the list. They're everywhere. Hell, DeAndre Swift was from St. Joseph's Prep up there in Philadelphia. And they've always, no Sean Marino. Go back. He was from exit 95 or whatever in New Jersey. That's the whole state's one exit after another. But they when they get to Georgia, it's like, Kirby, you are a product of Georgia and that mindset. I think you pointed this out on the show last week. There are 26 members of the staff at Georgia who went to school there. I mean, it matters a lot to them. Not to borrow the phrase, it just means more. But these guys, it's in their blood, the red and black.
Definitely, and I think that's a big part of the draw for some of those guys who came back. I'm convinced had Will Muschamp not gotten a South Carolina job when he did, he probably comes back with Kirby then as Georgia's defensive coordinator. I think that they care about Georgia, that they want to see it succeed. Some of those guys were part of some big moments as players, but, they were never on national championship teams. I think about Brian McClendon. They had some real success in the early 2000s when he was a receiver during the Mark Richt era. But yeah, I think these guys care. A lot of these guys grew up in the state of Georgia. They understand, you go from South Georgia all the way up to North Georgia, and people care about Georgia, want to see them have success. And I'd have to imagine, you want to have success wherever you are. If Will Muschamp could have won a championship at Florida, he'd been ecstatic. But to be able to do it in your home state, to do it for your alma mater, I think that adds so much. And I think that's part of why the standard's so high for those guys. They care about where they came from. They want to do the university right, and they want to, put together a winning product day in and day out. And they've done a great job of that during the Kirby Smart era. And just based on what they've done, I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Yeah, and you look in recruiting again. They're sitting up there at or near the top right now. They got almost most of their class has already filled out. So you got UT Martin, Ball State, and you go to South Carolina September 16th. Looking around in the East, and we talked about it with Doug Dean and Vince Ferrara and Houston Nutt before you came on. You want everybody being good. Competition just makes you better. Covering Georgia and knowing the SEC rivals in the East and the West, and not after next year, we're just going to have everybody's going to be all 16 and the two best play. Who is, to you, the biggest threat this year to try to knock out Georgia in the East or the West?
In the East,
but Georgia, just the East.
In the East, I'd say Tennessee. I'm very high on Kentucky, but Georgia, for the most part, has done a good job of taking care of Kentucky. I could see them pushing Tennessee for that second spot, but I think the fact that Tennessee game is in Neyland, it's late in the year, you're probably banged up by the time you get to that game in November. I believe that's like November 18th or 19th. It's going to be a very competitive game. I think that Tennessee's offense is really dangerous, and you got to watch them. But Tennessee, to me, is the team in the East that can really push Georgia.
And then, and again, when people talk about this schedule, remember last year you got away a really close game up in Columbia, Missouri, and another tough game was in Lexington against Kentucky. So I think a lot of people will tell you, with Mark Stoops, they're always going to be in that at least 7 or 8 win area. But they've got to get their offensive line better. They got Devin Leary coming in from NC State, so that should work. A couple of questions now. You got Florida playing at Utah. You got a pick on that one?
I think Utah. I think if Cam Rising doesn't play for Utah, that Florida might have a chance, but I'm just not a big believer in Florida this year. I do really like Trevor Etienne. I think they got a good run game going, and I think really highly of Billy Napier, but I don't see Florida winning that game. And if Cam Rising is playing, I feel that much more confident in Utah.
Yeah. Next question from a viewer. Florida, Georgia, Jacksonville. All this talk, stadium expansion. It's going to be easy for them to, during that time, push it away. Are you for keeping the game in Jacksonville, or you want it to go home and home?
I want to keep it in Jacksonville. I think that it's nice to have that tradition. I think it's been there for a long time, and I do understand sort of the pull to move it to the home and home. And I think when they do that stadium expansion and move those games on campus while the Jaguars revamp the stadium, that it will be a fun experience. But so much in college football is changing. I mean, we're talking about SMU and Cal and Stanford about to go into the ACC.
Yeah.
I want to keep some of the things we can keep. And I know that Kirby wants another recruiting weekend. You look at the numbers, Rob, he's done pretty good with that game in Jacksonville. I don't think that they're needing it. And I think ultimately it'll stay in Jacksonville just because of the money. And that's what it all comes down to. That's what this conversation about the conference stuff is. It all comes down to money. I think it will stay in Jacksonville.
And I'm just going to take a scientific wild ass guess and say there's some players that just make it down on their own dime to Jacksonville for that game. I'm just going to guess that. But hey, want to say getting a lot of chatter from folks down on the coast. Shoney down in Valdosta, one of our listeners, is saying strongest wind I've ever seen here in Valdosta already coming in. So prayers for all the people in the path of that hurricane, because they bring on land, tornadoes, a lot of bad weather. So hunker down. You better be ready, because looks like some rough weather. Be prepared for it. Another question for you, and we got just a couple of minutes before we run out of here. And this question is, with Georgia, with Kirby, as young as he is, what is your biggest fear that happens to Kirby, especially if he wins a third straight national championship? How do you keep doing that and live with that pressure? Good question.
Well, I think that's one of those things that, that this is what they pay the coaches for. They have to sort of understand how to handle themselves. And, I see him being at Georgia a long time, but, he's at the point he can do whatever he wants. If he wants to be a guy that walks away from it after a run of dominance, you can't really blame him, especially as his kids are growing up. But no, I mean, I think he's going to be at Georgia for quite some time. And he's one of those guys. I mean, he got to learn from the master when it came to Nick Saban, understanding how to motivate guys. So I don't think there's any fears that really jump out to me. I mean, he's going to keep on keeping on. And that guy loves the coach. You can say whatever about him or things you want to critique, but he loves football. He loves the relationships with the players. I think he's going to continue doing what he's doing and seeing how long he can run it.
Another one, Glenn Schumann, defensive coordinator, along with Will Muschamp. And you've got Kirby Smart. You really got three smart guys, no pun intended, but three brilliant defensive minds. And it seems like there are not a lot of problems. I mean, they're all going, look, we're all on the same page. That's hard to do. That's a gift as a head coach to be able to manage all those guys.
Definitely. And I think that those guys put ego aside. I mean, I think they understand, that they're all working toward the same goal. And something that's been good to hear the last few years, Kirby talk about, when it comes to the staff, basically they're all open ears when it comes to suggestions, things like that. Sports staff, anybody around, they want to do what they can to put these guys in winning position. And I think everybody understands that. I think they're really good at sort of checking ego at the door and doing what they can to put Georgia in position to win.
Last question. Any breaking news on the recruiting trail for this year? I mean, we're getting guys committing now. Arkansas got a 5-star for the class of 26. I mean, it's but look, first one to offer usually gets them.
Yeah, nothing really. I mean, for Georgia, especially in that 2024 class, there's just a few guys left out there. We're seeing what happens. LJ McCray is a big defensive lineman. It seems like Georgia and Florida are really the leaders for him. A few other guys out there, but they've put this class in a very good position. They're the number one team in the country when it comes to that 2024 cycle. They're in good shape. They're still chasing guys, but for the most part, they've kind of wrapped it up. It's kind of funny to see how different things are, how much the timeline's kind of been moved up, but still a few guys are chasing and trying to add to a very strong class.
Okay, we'll squeeze in this last question. David Jolly, who do you think could be Georgia's biggest breakout player this year?
Well, Dominic Lovett's a guy I really like. I think he's got a chance to really stand out. And other than him, I'd say probably a guy like Damon Wilson, who's a true freshman. And also throw out Jalen Walker, who is a sophomore that I think has a chance to really, really be special. He's kind of spent time between inside linebacker and outside. But when in doubt, go with a Georgia defender because they know how to evaluate those guys. They know how to pick them out. They've got some good defenders to choose from.
All right, look, great stuff as always. Most often we see the face of Christ and the least among us. Keep those folks in the path of that hurricane in Florida and Georgia down there in your prayers. We live in the greatest country in the history of the world. Don't ever forget that. Jordan, let people know how they can follow you, keep up with you. And I want to compliment you. You are really well prepared. I mean, I wish you were my lawyer if I was going before the Supreme Court. I think you could get me off. But great job as always. Thanks.
I appreciate it. Dogs247.com on Twitter at Jordan Davis Hill, on Twitter at Dogs247. It's game week, Rob, and I'm ready to get this thing rolling.
Hell yeah. Thanks so much. Got a great show in line for tomorrow. Thanks for listening. We are out of here.